Why don't we get started? Call the Transportation Commission meeting to order for August 11th, 2021. Joe, if you could read the instructions, please.
Welcome to our virtual meeting. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. Members, if you are able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you're able, please activate your video when you are speaking. All panelists, that is alders, commission members, and staff, have the ability to mute and unmute themselves. Please continue to use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak. The name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the Transportation Commission, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Chair Kovich, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Patrick, would you call the roll, please?
Charles Miadzi. Present. Barbara Harrington McKinney. Chris McCahill.
Here.
Ann Kovich.
Here.
Denise Jess.
Here.
Bill Bremer.
Here.
Ken Strite.
Here.
Bridget Brown. Harold Cleams.
Here.
Okay. Did everybody have a chance to take a look at the minutes from last time? If so, anybody willing to make a motion? Ken?
Move approval.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Denise?
Yep, I can second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing no hands, we'll assume a unanimous consent vote for approval of the minutes, unless you wish to vote no. If so, please raise your hand. Okay. Any public comments, Joe or Patrick?
I didn't see any.
Okay. Any disclosures or recusals this evening? Okay. First item on the agenda. Yes. So item number 2 on the agenda, the Metro Transit Annual Financial Statement Audit Report. I believe Jody's here from Baker Tilly, and Justin's here, and Jennifer's here from Metro Transit.
Yep. So I will just introduce Jennifer Schiller, our new finance manager, for those of you who have not met her, and then Jody with our audit firm, who will give our presentation today.
Thank you very much for having me with you tonight. So I believe in your packets, everyone received the copy of the financial statements, as well as a copy of the citywide communication or results report, as we call it, insights. And then there was also a short document that's an overview that I wanted to walk through. So to go through, is it easier if I share my screen or?
That's fine if you'd like to share, Jody.
Okay. All right. So the 3 items that I'd like to cover tonight is just an overview of the audit process, the required communications to you as the governing body for transit, and then answer any questions that you might have on the audit process or the larger reports that were provided that I tend not to walk through in essence of time. So just a quick introduction to the team. Myself, Jody Dobson, I'm a partner with Baker Tilly, and I have worked on your audit in various roles throughout my career over the last 20 years. So it's always a pleasure to get to work with you again. Bethany Ryers, another individual that is dedicated in our public sector team, a director. performed what we call the concurring review, or the second and final review of the financial statements. She's not involved in the day-to-day of the audit. It kind of gives that fresh perspective before we release the report. And then Megan Cahill serves as the manager on the audit. She's worked with transit for roughly 5 years and is very much overseeing the day-to-day of the audit process with your staff. So a little bit then about the process. The first thing we do as part of our audit is to assess internal controls. This is not for the purpose of giving you an opinion on those internal controls, but us looking at your processes and controls allows us to identify how we want to test various transaction cycles or balances for the audit process. Ultimately, however, if there's anything that we identify during that process that is a concern, we would report that to you. Or if there's items that we identify that could be a best practice, we'll share that with management if it's things that we've seen others do differently. So as we go through first and look at those processes, and then we design our audit, and we look at a number of different areas in the audit. So this can be cash and investments, disbursements, payables, grant receivables, capital assets, etc., and perform our testing on that. Ultimately, our goal is to issue your audit opinion. And so the transit financial statements receive what we call a unmodified or a clean opinion. That's the highest level of assurance that we can give. And that lets you and any outside readers know that these are a fair presentation of the financial position and the results of operations for the year. The financial statements themselves are the responsibility of management. All of the information in the document comes from your team. They actually pull that together, and then we go through a review process and work through any finalization. I also like to point out that there's a section at the beginning of the report called Management Discussion and Analysis. And this is really a great overview of what happened during the year. It's a little shorter than the rest of the report, gets rid of some of the accounting jargon that gets less included in the rest. And so this is a nice area to focus if you have any constituents that are wanting to ask about the financials. And then because of the federal and state awards that the transit receives, you are a significant portion of the citywide single audit. And so for that, we will select those key grant programs. There's a process that we go through as to how we select which grants are tested each year. And there we are testing not only for compliance with the grant agreement, but also that there are controls in place to ensure that compliance. And so the conclusion there was that you complied with all of the requirements of those grants. We didn't have any findings related to transit. So one thing we do like to look at is just a highlight of the numbers. And I've got just 2 graphs here to keep it high level because I know you get financial reports on a monthly basis from management. But looking back over the last 5 years, what we see here in looking at the revenues is that the total revenues for 2020 was down a little bit. And we'll see on the next slide that's in line with expenses. I've been seeing this in a lot of transit organizations just with the decrease in service that was provided in 2020 as a result of the pandemic conditions. That operating expenses were down when there was less hours being provided. And as a result, that grant revenue that's tied to reimbursement of expenses was down. But the other thing that we notice here is that the federal funding in 2020 was a larger portion of the total, offsetting the passenger fares and operating revenues, which were a lower portion, as well as some of the local subsidies, which was smaller. And that was really a result of the receipt of the CARES funding that came in mid-2020 and how that was applied to offset some of the other revenues that either weren't there or to allow the city some flexibility. And so here again, then we look at the expenses again over that 5-year period. And while we see the total expenses were down for 2020, the makeup of the expenses of the components were really consistent, with the largest area being that salaries and benefits. And that's something that we see in almost every transit organization that I work with, is that is the largest expense component. Contracted services did decrease a little bit. again, just as a result of that change in service levels. So as I mentioned, there are a number of items that we're required to communicate to you as the governing body as a result of the audit. As I said, our responsibility is to design our audit so that we can issue our audit opinion and make sure that we're meeting all of our standards. So that's ultimately our goal and what you're looking for from us. If there's additional information that would be included in a document with the audit statements, we just clarify that our opinion is over the financial statements as provided and not any additional information that they may be future bound with. There was no changes to the plan, timing, or scope of the audit from what was anticipated. I will say the audit this year was completed completely virtual, which was a little new. I think we did most of it virtual last year as well, but going through that again, we've gotten more efficient at it. Still would prefer to get out and see people, but it worked, and we thank your team for all that they did to get us what we needed in that environment. If there are changes in accounting policies, concerns with accounting estimates, or any disclosures, we'd bring that to your attention. We look at all of those areas and had no items to report. This is my no news is good news slide. We had no difficulties, no disagreements. We're not aware of any consultations for alternative methods of accounting. Management provided us all the representations that were needed. There were no uncorrected misstatements, and any adjustments that did come up during discussions were all taken care of in the reports, and nothing significant was adjusted during the audit. So that lets you know that you're getting good information throughout the year. So with that, again, I just want to say thank you to staff. I know when we come in, we ask a lot of questions and ask for a lot of information, and we do appreciate all the assistance. And are there any questions on any of the documents that you might have?
Anybody have any questions? Anybody have any questions for Jody? Oh, first, I assume we don't have any registrants for this item. We hadn't when we started.
No.
Okay. Anybody have any questions or comments? Okay, I think we should have a motion to accept the report from Baker Tilly. Ken?
So moved.
I think Harold is next.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, we'll assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no. If so, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you very much, Jody. Ken, do you have your hand up still?
I just want to know, so when was the transition? When did Wayne, did he retire, or did I just miss it?
Yeah, Wayne retired in, I believe, at the end of April or mid-April. Jennifer came on board with us in May or June. I can't remember exactly.
June 1st.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Okay, thank you very much. All right, item number 3 is quarterly updates from Metro Traffic Engineering and Parking. Justin, you're up first.
All right. So just a update on a handful of things that may be of interest to you all. So first, we're gearing up for fall service changes with the university coming back to something closer to normal. We do expect to see some ridership bump and some additional demand especially in the campus area. Everything's on target for that to go into place here in about 2 weeks. We've also been working closely with the school district on the school Dodger routes. So you all may remember, and this is a plan that initiated before I started, that the school district's in the process of transitioning many of the middle school routes over to yellow school bus because they were changing their bell times. And so that transition is continuing this year with 3 more schools transitioning from Metro to yellow bus. And the plan is that that would continue into the following year, into 22. But so far, everything seems to be on target. If you remember, early this year, the TC approved a couple changes that will be implemented with this. So that includes restoring the Route 38 and the, I believe the 28. And then those 2 routes replacing the 10 and the 27. So that will be implemented here with this August service change. We're continuing to get, especially now that the university has announced they're going back mostly to normal, we've gotten a lot of people who have raised concerns around some other routes that are not planned to be restored, specifically the 19 we've heard a lot about. I think, as I may have mentioned to you all in the past, we're not really in a position to start restoring all of our service to 2019 levels, primarily because of staffing issues. We're still over 30 drivers down below what our budgeted level is. We've had a big uptick in retirements during the pandemic. We've been kind of struggling to keep our head above water and kind of not lose ground, let alone trying to regain staffing levels. We're finally starting to see some of our new strategies bear fruit. We've got a new class starting on Monday, which could, cross our fingers, have about 7 people come in. We've had problems in the past, though, of people having everything ready to go and then just not showing up on the first day of class. So we'll be encouraged by how many people actually show up on Monday. But that's part of a long-term strategy, and I don't anticipate that we'll be fully staffed until next summer, summer of 22. And so, we could start restoring some services. My fear, however, is that we would have to require a tremendous amount of overtime in order to restore service to 2019 levels. And we've just been driving through a pandemic for 18 months where our folks have been working, they've been in the seat throughout that entire time, taking risks and, transporting our essential workers. And frankly, people are stressed out. And so for us to, in turn, then require significant levels of overtime to restore to our 2019 service levels, I worry that would have the opposite effect and actually encourage even more retirements and departures. And so, we may end up further behind than where we started. And so I feel strongly that we need to kind of hold the line with where we're at right now until we can get our staffing levels to a reasonable level and focus our energy on getting those staffing levels up. And like I said, we've started to do that, and it's starting to bear fruit. You may have seen advertising that we're doing. We're doing, virtual advertising on the buses, in print, kind of. We've revamped our hiring process to where our hiring will essentially be continuous now, so that we never have to close the posting. And we're starting, that pipeline is starting to churn. We've also, we're working with our union on a new contract negotiation on some things that might help us in recruitment as well. So all those things are in process, but they'll take time. And so that's why I'm hopeful that by next summer, we'll be fully staffed and ready to go back to 2019 service levels. Ridership is about double what it was this time last year, which is good, but it's still about half of what it was this time 2019. So we were, roughly 20% of 2019 levels in 2020 over the summer. Right now we're at about 45%-ish of 2019 levels. And so we certainly are making progress where things are coming back, but we're not anywhere near all the way back. So I do expect ridership to be a continuing climb for the next several years. Our budgetary and estimates are estimating that 2024 is around when we expect to see ridership return to 2019 levels, just based on, frankly, that's an educated guess based on just how long ridership tends to respond to different changes in service levels. But things like this Delta variant, and if for any reason the UW retrenches their reopening, that certainly will have significant effects and delay any return to normalcy for us. We have closed on our satellite facility. We are now the proud owners of a second operations facility on Hanson Road by the airport, the former FedEx site. We're making incremental progress towards moving in. We have our buildings and grounds operation, so basically all of our stop and shelter maintenance groups and snow plowing and all of that. They are moving out of their current facility, which was a small rented facility that we have. And they will make that transition fully by the end of this year and be moved out there completely. We've also relocated many of the buses that we don't use, especially over the summer, have relocated out there. I think we've got about 27 buses out there right now. And so, expect that transition to take a while, but we are making use of that facility already. And it's being extremely helpful, especially as we embark on our next phase of renovation at our main facility on East Washington. That construction has started. This is the third of 4 phases. This should renovate the actual the maintenance area where all the bus lifts are, and the work actually happens on the buses. And then there will be on that project, there'll be a 4th phase that would happen in 2023 that would focus on much of the office area in that building, which is essentially unchanged from 30 or 40 years ago, and is in pretty bad shape. So we're looking forward to getting that 3rd phase of this project complete, which will probably go through the next 9 months or so. And then we have our technology system RFP out on the street right now. We had, I think I've talked with you all about this before. This will completely overhaul almost all of our technology systems on our fleet and operations, with the exception of the fare system. That one's carved out. We'll talk about that more in a second. But that RFP for technology is out on the street. It's a very long, complicated process that we don't anticipate to be wrapped up and a vendor selected till probably the end of the year. But we did see pretty strong interest from a lot of vendors. We just went through our question and answer session and had over 200 questions come in from vendors. And so that was a pretty monumental task to respond to all of those, but it's good to see we're getting a lot of interest out there. And then we did carve out the fare system from that. It became clear there was a lot of work to do on the policy side around fares before we were ready to release an RFP. And so we've presented to the Policy and Planning Board several times, as well as had a public meeting and a public hearing in that body around the policy for fare collection. We are planning to present an action item to them actually next week to kind of codify that policy. This project does, it sits in an odd middle ground between TPBB and TC, in that, there's a lot of elements that are very policy focused and many others that are more implementation focused. And so we've created a document that kind of separates out responsibilities between the two bodies. And essentially the action now will be at the policy level. That will enable us to prepare an RFP and solicit a vendor for the fare system. And then there would be 2 different actions for the TC, one approving that vendor, the contract with that vendor, and making sure that it's in accordance with the policy that's set by TPPB. And then another that defines a lot of the implementation parameters. So for example, we're proposing to move to fare capping, which is rather than purchasing a monthly pass, users pay individual rides, but up to a point, and then every ride after that point is free. That really opens the door for lower income folks who can't afford to shell out $60 to $80 up front for a monthly pass to benefit from the passes, because unfortunately we have people riding every day who end up paying $100 a month just because they couldn't afford the 60 at the beginning of the month. And so that opens the door for them to benefit from that program. But there's no, the implementation parameters around what is that cap, what is the duration, is it a weekly, is it a monthly cap? Those sorts of implementation details we would bring to the TC to codify at a later date once we've developed that entire list with the vendor. So with that, that's all I've got for you today, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Ken, go ahead.
Justin, I just have a question. When does the federal law that required masking, is that still set for September-ish, or have they extended that?
It currently goes through, I believe, September 13th. I may have that date a little off, but it's mid-September somewhere.
And then the second question is, remembering that the 80 routes remind everyone of sardine cans, how are you dealing with that? It doesn't seem fair that the bus driver should be enforcing, keeping spaces and all that. I mean, that's the one that because I think the other buses, I'm thinking people are going to sort of come back more slowly, but the students are going to all want to get on that very first bus. What's going on there?
So we do have the mask requirement right now, but we do not have any capacity requirements. So there are, so there's no strict policy that will prevent us from loading up as many people as want to get on the bus.
Okay.
Getting on. However, as I mentioned, we're trying to hold the service level where it is now, but we are starting to make gains in our hiring. And so as we start to add people, that means we can deploy extra buses where we need to supplement service. And so exactly to your point, we may have capacity to add 1 or 2 buses to that route just to alleviate overcrowding if it does become an issue. So that's kind of the strategy that we're on right now, is that any extra capacity we have, in terms of bus drivers, we would focus on using them to relieve overcrowding issues on existing routes.
Thank you.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for the update about the driver situation. I'm really glad to hear that you're making progress. I know I kept pushing about that because, yeah, that really seems to be the one thing that's holding us back. So you mentioned you're hoping that by summer next year, staffing levels will be back to normal, and you mentioned that that might allow you to go back to 2019 service levels. But I also remember you mentioning earlier that there's this issue with well, maybe you don't want to bring back routes that then are not part of the network redesign, or need to take them away a year later or whatever the timeline is. So what's the thinking with that? I mean, I'm on favor of bringing service levels back up, but I guess we have to do it in a thoughtful way.
Yeah, so notice I did say 2019 service level. I didn't say exact 2019 service, and that's because we don't know what service will look like. So the network redesign, we hope to have some clearer direction on that around the end of this year or first quarter of next year. And so certainly as we do start to restore additional service, we would want to make sure that it's in accordance with what that plan is going to do, so that we aren't in a position where we restore a route for 3 months and then take it right back away again, because we want to make sure that we want to limit the change and upheaval that people experience to the extent that we can, and try to make sure we're strategic in the way we restore services.
Yeah, so that's another situation, Justin, where we're going to want to stay up to date with you on where network redesign is, because those service changes, interim service changes, come to the TC. So another one of those blurry lines. Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, one additional question. Can you give an update on the electric buses that Metro has been testing? I remember going to the fleet vehicle maintenance facility and you couldn't get on the bus because Metro hadn't accepted the buses yet, which made me like, oh, interesting. I wonder what's going on there.
Yeah, so that's been a bit of a saga around our electric buses. So those buses were delivered to us twice, and we returned them to their factory in South Carolina twice. They were delivered to us a third time, and we did accept buses with conditions that there were a handful of things that the manufacturer needed to fix before we were ready to put those in service, primarily around the accessible path for wheelchairs, for people in wheelchairs kind of through the front end of the bus. And so they're in the process right now of, we actually just saw a couple plans come to us in the last few days around how exactly they're going to make those modifications. I would still hope to have those modifications done in the next month or so, and that would enable us to put those buses into service. That's really the only thing restricting us at this point. And so as soon as that's done, they'll go into service. I will say that we'll likely roll them out fairly slowly. Put them on routes where we're only running them, 80 miles a day or so to start, so that we can really put them through their paces and make sure everything is working as intended. Because the last thing we'd want to do is have an in-service failure of some sort, of any sort, especially running out the battery. And then as we go into winter as well, that's the hardest time on these buses. And so we'll really want to do a lot of testing throughout the winter before we kind of put them in full service for replacing putting them on an entire all-day route.
Okay, thank you.
Denise, you're next.
Great, thank you so much, Anne. Justin, could you comment on what the implications, you anticipate the implications of the 50% state funding cut to be? I'm guessing we won't feel it in 22, but kind of what are you looking at the projection of the impact of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you're exactly right that we don't expect to see this be an issue in 2022. Essentially, for those of you who aren't familiar, the state did cut our funding in half in 2022. But fortunately, the state statute restores it to normal levels in 2023. So at least we don't have to have that fight again in the future. We will have to draw down our federal funds more quickly, federal rescue funds, to fill that gap. And so what that means is there'll be $8.5 million fewer federal rescue funds available to us in 23 and 24. We will draw them, we'll exhaust those funds quicker. Right now, we expect ridership to return to normal in 2024. And if so, we will have an $8 million gap at that point that we'll have to then fill with federal formula funds, which we get on a regular basis, and then they won't be available for capital. So long story short, we expect this to impact our capital budget long term, but not our operational budget ever. And the capital impact will be, a few years out.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it was fine. If ridership returns to normal faster, then that impact will be less. If ridership takes even longer than we expect to return to normal, then this issue could drag into our operating budget.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Alderman Yazzie, you're next.
Yes, just a couple of questions. One of the questions I had was on the north side specifically, I believe there's a couple of routes that were suspended. Do you see those routes coming back, and how soon? And my second question is, I would like to see if there was some way for traffic to be able to send me the ridership I don't know how you guys determine that, but just to know how many people and what corridors you guys see as the most people, the most ridership, the Sherman Avenue or the Northport. Is that something that you guys can possibly get? So I know what the ridership is like in the certain corridors on the north side.
Sure. So on your first question, in the short term, no, we don't expect to be restoring those routes because of the staffing issues that I mentioned before. Long term, exactly what form those routes are restored into will depend on that network redesign project. And so that's what's currently in process and will hopefully be done around the end of this year, or early next year. Through that project, we actually have a report around existing, what our existing conditions are that was released earlier this spring. And that actually has a lot of the information I think you're looking for in terms of where people are riding and where the demand is. And so we can be sure to get that to you, get a link over that to you so you can review that, and hopefully that gives you what you need. If not, we can certainly get you more detailed information about any particular location. We actually have a lot of it up on a public website that we can share as well.
Okay, and just a recent, even I know that you talked about one in the past, but during this pandemic and all that, how ridership is low. Can I see what those numbers look like too, in contrast to the before?
Sure. So that I can send that to you, but and then that report that I'll send you also will have a lot of that information.
Thank you.
I don't have good our location by location ridership data around where people are boarding the bus. That's not something we have readily available, and so we have to go through a pretty intensive data analysis process to get that information. And so that report that I'll send you is the best source for that, because we did go through that process to figure out where people were riding.
Thank you.
Yes, and if that's something that other people might be interested in, perhaps you could send it to Patrick and he can send it out to everybody on TC, so everybody can see that same information. Other comments or questions for Justin? Okay, thanks, Justin. Yang, you're next.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry for the bit delay over there. Was working on something, and yeah, sure, my name being called. Sorry about that. I want to provide my report in kind of 4 different parts. So the first, I'll talk about our staffing and operations. And the second, I'll talk about our operating budget request for 2022. And thirdly, provide some updates for some of the projects. And lastly, I want to give the committee a quick summary about the situation on East Washington Avenue, since I know that you all saw it on media, and we plan to bring more details to the commission when the police finish investigation on some of those crashes. But just quick summary on that now. Actually, I will also try to finish maybe my update with something positive. And let's move on to staffing and operations first. It has been a very productive season for us. We did have some setback because of the lead time, the longer lead time. It now requires to get the materials, and we learned that everything takes longer now with the COVID and with the supply chain problems. We also had some delays in sign making because we have outdated and undersized air conditioning system in our sign shop. It just cannot keep up with the hot and humid weather. And sometimes it is done, and we cannot control the temperature enough to control the temperature and the moisture enough, being able to print the signs. So there have been having some delays on some of the small projects, but for most part, we're coming along really nicely and rolling out a lot of projects. And we're really happy to see our staff are doing really well. In the past few months, everyone stayed healthy, productive. So that's really good, and hopefully that will not be impacted by the new variant Delta. We all keep our fingers crossed on that. We also collaborated with the parking division, and we together we worked out a reopening plan for both divisions. So that's the plan is being carried out right now. So we already opened up to the public from early July, and so for in-person public service at all locations. And right now we are taking telework requests from our team members, and we will evaluate them and to see how much we can accommodate. For traffic engineering, we really didn't have a whole lot of issues with teleworking for office staff through the pandemic. So we maintain a really good level of productivity. And I think we even, in some areas, we even see more productivity. So we intend to allow some of that as we kind of move back to the new norm. We also have very tight space in the office because of growth, because of the change in the city structure. We don't have enough cubicles for everyone. So actually, we're thinking about setting up some of the cubicles as flex space, so people can share, especially people who telework. So there's another correction to do, but we hope to kind of start the new norm in September. Again, that's assuming that things stay as it is today, and hopefully Delta will be controlled. So that's for staff operations. I'll move on to the 2022 operating budget request. All the requests from agencies were published by finance, and we request above $8.6 million in total for next year. So that's in line with the cost to continue estimate set by the finance department. We also were asked to identify 5% reduction as all the general fund agencies. And I have to tell you that it's quite a hard, difficult task for us. I'm sure for some other agencies as well. For us, we really didn't build in a lot of extra things there, and the city has been growing and been taking on more and more with same amount of staff. So that turned out to be a very challenging task, but our management team did work together, and we basically turned over every stone, look at everything, and we come up with our proposal. So we brought up 6 things that on the table to meet that 5% cut. First thing is really a positive spot. Actually, I think that's the really demonstrates how capital investments can save operating costs and can improve sustainability. So that's the saving from electricity cost from street lighting due to the citywide LED street lighting conversion project. So we estimate we can save $120,000 in energy cost by those projects next year, and we're going to see more as we convert more. So that's really good. And we are also proposed to stop pre-print the physical back maps. It's a difficult choice, but we understand that most folks now have access to a mobile phone. So we feel like it's reasonable maybe to stop printing the paper version of the bicycle maps and stop distributing that, but we'll make them really available and convenient online and also for for mobile phones. It should have a small impact, but it does has some impact. We also look at try to do more capital projects. There are pros and cons on that as well, which means $1 more we charge to capital projects. There's $1 more less. We can actually purchase equipment and purchase materials to do an actual physical project for improvements. But for some of the smaller projects, we haven't been charging any staff hours to it, like for design, for other things. We will have to do some of that now. We also looking to keep some positions open, some vacancies open for 2022. And we also have to cut some pavement marking projects. We have to cut some epoxy program for next year, and have to cut some of the paint program that's done by the shop, by our own crew, some next year as well. So I think both will have a significant amount of impacts, especially I think as a community has been demanding higher level of service, and as we're trying to make sure everything's clear marked, trying to maintain safety. But because of the 5% goal, we have to put some of this in. We did save a portion of it to take care of the more important items. But for other items, if these items are adopted, we'll have to look at maybe skip some of the remarking for a year, and hopefully we can get all the full funding back next year, and we can take care of those needs again. The positive side is that we were also able to put in a supplemental request for additional staff resources. So we put together some statistics in our request memo. The city has been growing, and for example, the number of signals we maintain increased 12%, from 2014 to now, and the RFBs, the pet flashers, has increased 480%, and the DFBs, those are speedboards, increased about 300% or so, and for cameras, like 400%. Also a lot of cameras, a lot of fiber optic work, and for the locates, the hotline tickets, for past 10 years, we saw a 50% jump in those. So every ticket we had to go out to mark the facilities so that they're not hit by the private constructions or public construction works. We have I think we have quite a few different needs, but we have to prioritize it. So we also cheated a bit. We actually packaged 2 positions instead of 1 position into a request. But really we feel like those 2 are related, and really help us to better deal with the needs of the growing community, and improve safety in more equity focused manner, and also we can do better public engagement on many of the projects. So the 2 positions, one is a new position, in the electrical field section. It's a supervisor position, trying to correlate all the work and work with office staff, work with engineers, working with other city departments, and working with neighborhoods, especially the underserved ones. Another one is pedal bike position. We have a 60% position. We're requesting increase that one to 100% position. So that really will free up some some time. We can do better engagement in the low-income neighborhoods, people of color. Really get to know their needs more and do projects that suit their that really suit their needs. So I think those positions definitely will help us to do better engagement and improve equity in our service delivery. So hopefully, we can get the positions. So let's move on to project updates. So really quickly, a few that are, I think many people are interested in. So first, the 20 is plenty. There has been a lot of interest from a community on that. And we actually started the program on Monday in 2 neighborhoods that the commission approved a few weeks before. So that's after a lot of engagement with the neighborhood, with the others. So we want to, everybody be aware of it. We're really thankful that the media has been a partner on this. They have been covering the story a lot. And actually, I think my staff who is working on this, Jeremy Nash, has become very famous in Madison. So he's like a celebrity now. Yeah, really good to see that. And for Vision Zero, we, as many of you know, that we finished the first draft of the action plan, and we presented that to the Transportation Policy Planning Board and get some very useful feedback. And the team is looking to that and improving it. We also have a stakeholder meeting scheduled for next Wednesday, and we'll also get inputs from a kind of larger stakeholder group from all the community organizations, hopefully getting additional input for the action plan and for many other items. The public engagement, so that's has been done through Let's Talk Streets. So I provided update recently on that at a joint meeting. So I'm not repeat that, but hopefully the Delta we has planned quite a few kind of in-person engagements. We thought that now finally we will be able to do after a long time of not being able to do it due to COVID. So hopefully we can still keep that on track. And hopefully, the Delta will not become very bad in our community. Share streets. So the project bike lanes on Edward Avenue was implemented a few weeks ago, and we saw a lot of usage of that. So we did some improvements compared to last year. I think folks really enjoy that. So that's really good. And we did had some delay deploying other streets, as I mentioned, because of the inventory delivery issues, and also because of our ability to make signs were impacted. But we finally were able to get all of them done. And so we also used totally different setup than last year, which I think are much more clear to tell folks the reason for the program, what it's for, and also it works a lot better for the fire department. and other emergency responders. People saw them, and we now got many requests to how can we make it permanent. We also got the people from other streets asking us, can we have those as well? So I guess that's that's good problem to have. So actually we're looking to some whether we can make some of the program permanent through the new Slow Streets program. And for Slow Street program, we're actively working on 3 different projects in the NRT areas. For some of the low-income communities, and we're working some engagement on that. So hopefully we can roll out some projects that really works for the neighborhoods soon. We also moving forward with a lot of the kind of smaller traffic calming projects, pedestrian bicycle enhancement projects, and safe route to school projects. So next year, all of those will be just one Safe Madison, Safe Streets Madison program. But this year, since they were already approved early this year, we're carrying them out, with different arrangements. We've been producing detailed plans for each project, secure materials, purchase equipment, and making them happen in the field. We also finally secured a contractor. Raymond Cattell was selected to help us to do many of the concrete work on the street, and they will start about the end of the month. I think October, August 30th is a date that they plan to start work on those projects. And I think the next major thing, really quickly, I want to provide a summary on East Washington Avenue, the safety situation. You will hear a little bit more from Lieutenant Ferrari on that in his report. But I think all of you have seen the media coverage on East Washington Avenue. It has been a very sad situation. So, for example, on a normal year, we may have 1 or 2 fatalities on East Washington Avenue. So now we are a little bit over 7 months into a year where we already had 5 fatalities on East Washington Avenue. And most of them involve pedestrians, with 1 bicyclist, speeding, alcohol, definitely has played a very big factor role in it. But we're also looking to other things, such as one thing we noticed that nearly all crashes happened at night, especially very early in the morning. So we have been reviewing the lighting for our areas, and I've been working with, I think the lighting in general is adequate, but we're working to see whether we can make them even better, even brighter. Especially we've been working with the city forestry to look at every tree to see if the trees has been blocking some of the lights, do some trimming as needed. We also think about hoping using some other ways to improve. I think for long term, we're definitely think about the more fundamental infrastructure change, but that may take very careful planning and a lot of resource to do that. But for now, we're looking for looking to whether we can do some smaller projects to help. And we also talk to the state DOT and work with them on that right now. One thing that you may notice that we start to use some more creative messaging on East Washington Avenue to grab people's attention. In the past, our message campaign, for speed boards, and message boards, we use we just ask people to slow down. that may not really grab people's attention. So we come up with a library of creative things that you want to post on the message boards. So we have two types of boards. We have a couple of permanent boards, overhead ones that city owns but controlled by the state, because the state was the lead on the construction project years before, and they tied that into all their kind of ITS system back in Milwaukee. So I've been working with them to post a message down there, and so far, so they did. I think they did one message. I think it's still there today. Ask people not to. I think it says no test and drive, and sell. Also no, something funny like that. But we have many more that I think they need to look into it, whether they can post it on there, because they have a pretty strict library of language they can use, and this is beyond. This is outside the library, so they have to get approval on that. So they are working on that, and for our own mobile message boards, we'll start to put some. So it has we start put message on there as well, but those had to be shorter messages because of the limitation of the boards. So I think you will start to see some maybe funny or sometimes really serious and different messages on those being posted on there. Hopefully, really grab people's attention and let them to think. Whether my 30 seconds. Getting to somewhere faster will worth somebody's life. We're also developing some more bus ads on the bus to convey the message and to public education. So thanks to Metro's help, right now we have something for already out there, and those are those with a positive message that everybody can accept, such as safety starts with all of us. But now we want to add a little bit spicing it and really grab people's attention, put it in front of people's face. We're looking at a couple of we developed quite a few different options, and we narrowed down on two to start with. One is the ghost bike idea, East Washington first. And another one is a teddy bear lying near a wheel of a car and with blood on it. So I think those are really get people thinking, even though some maybe not be comfortable for everyone. So we want to see how that works, and we're also trying to work with some of the behavior science experts, especially from UW. Whether this works, or what's the best way to do this in the future to educate the public. Again, I think this is a transition period for East Washington Avenue. East Washington Avenue used to be very different over the last few years. It really transformed, basically transformed from parking lots on both sides to high-rise buildings, lots of different use, restaurants, residential, bars, and we saw a lot of different activities. The infrastructure didn't keep up with that. And also, I think people's driving behavior is not keeping up with that. They're still used to the kind of the old highway type of facility. We definitely has a lot of things to do. And I think this is going to be a long-term project, and we'll come to work on it to address the challenges. Another challenge is that where I think one idea we're seriously looking into is the reduced capacity on East Washington Avenue. What's the impact to other streets? Study shows that if we take one off East Washington Avenue or each direction, we're going to see 20% increase of traffic on Johnson Street, Gorham Street, Williamson Street, and all the neighborhood streets. So I think what we really want to do is taking those traffic away, putting them into buses, put them on bikes, put them on foot, instead of putting them into a still vehicle, but just on another street. So I think we had to do those very mindfully. Again, we'll provide maybe a more detailed update in the future once some of the more information become public. And as promised, I want to end with something very positive. So I just want to announce that we have won another award at the national level, actually international level, for our practice in transportation system management and operations. So we've been recognized for really promoting the idea of getting more out of existing infrastructure instead of expanding the infrastructure to meet the growing needs of the community. So we are one of the fast growing. So we are the fast growing region in the state, as you all know. And I think our approach to community growth is not to build additional roadways or widen the road. Really find ways either through better technology or through better management strategies, better operational strategies to get more out of less and to move people away, from single occupancy vehicles to other modes of transportation. And our effort has been noted by our peers in the industry. So we received our organizational award from the Institute of Transportation Engineers International through their Transportation Systems Management Operations Council. Sorry, that's a long name. But I think you got the idea. So here I also want to. I think we didn't get that award alone. I think that's the efforts of everyone here. I think our elected officials and of the whole community. I think we really work together, kind of define the direction of where we want to head to, and we made an investment on it, and we are given resources to do that, and we are allowed to innovate on that. So as a result, result of everybody's effort, we won this recognition, but we still have a long way to go, and we'll definitely do better in the future. So thank you very much. Sorry for taking quite some time.
Okay, Yang, comments or questions for Yang? Denise, go ahead.
So first of all, Yang, congratulations. That's awesome. And I have two comments. First, one, I really want to take this moment to publicly commend your department for your inclusivity and equity work, particularly focused in outreach with the disability and aging community. It's really outstanding. Your staff reach out to my agency and Access to Independence on a regular basis for consultation. And then, there's been a lot of work to be inclusive of the disability citizenry of Madison in different, streets and transportation projects. So I want to publicly name that, because while we are among the most vulnerable street users, we are often not solicited for our expertise and opinion, and you guys really rock that. So thank you so much for that work on soliciting from us what might work and what's really needed and what our experiences are, and then paying attention to that and figuring out how to incorporate and utilize it. The other thing I really wanted to shout out about is the potential benefit of the bus ads. My agency, we run bus ads for pedestrian safety in smaller markets like La Crosse and Eau Claire and Wausau and Green Bay. And for a month over the White Cane Safety Day period, and get really good response to those. We don't know how it impacts driver behavior, but we get media coverage, and people notice and pay attention to those bus ads. So I was excited when I heard you say that you were going to be tapping into that. So thanks again for the really good work.
Oh, thank you, Denise, and thank you and your organization for spending time and sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. I think again, we can do a better job for the great community by listening to you. So appreciate your support on that.
Is that all you had, Denise? Okay. Harold, you're next.
Sorry, I remuted myself. Thanks for the update, Yang. I have two questions. Let's start with the pavement markings. I appreciate the update and the challenges that you're facing there. I'm wondering, what is the longer term plan? Because, you said like, okay, maybe for 1 year, we'll just delay things and maybe the budget will be bigger next year, which is always like, well, maybe it will be. And I mean, I'm wondering, with BRT coming, where we will get many more bus lanes, which are all epoxy marked, which I guess the initial installation will probably be paid for out of the BRT funding. But I just see these increasing maintenance needs for the pavement marking. And so, I'm curious what the longer term plan for that is. I know there was some discussion about, for example, using colored asphalt or concrete to like have stuff that lasts longer, and maybe you have some other ideas.
Yeah, great question, Harold. Yeah, for the long term, as we take on more different things. For example, we already did much more, for example, continental crosswalk markings, bike markings, and we started doing the bus lane markings, and we through the BRT project, and also outside the BRT project, we're probably going to do a lot more of those as well. After the initial investment, everything become operating costs to maintain them. I definitely agree. For long term, we need much larger budget to keep supporting that. That's definitely true. I think the hope is that we can get through this difficult time. I think for next year, finance estimated that the city is going to face $18 million budget deficit to be addressed. So I think every agency will call to contribute to addressing that gap. So I think the things. I think even though we were asked to propose something that can last, not just one-time deal. We really cannot do that for some of this, including the paper marking programs. I think for the city has been doing a very good job maintaining all the paper markings compared to the other communities in this region, and also in other parts of the country. I think we're probably not the best in maintaining all those markings, but we're probably one of the top communities. Really maintain them, make them more visible. So I think for different situations like this, after I think maybe the council and the community look into the different needs out there in the community and how can we make our finance work. Maybe council and the community can decide whether we need to cut the paper marking funding for a year, and maybe just accept the fact that for a year also, for some paper markings out there, they're going to be less visible. But still, I think we put a lot of thoughts into that, and we discussed this we spent many hours within our agency to talk about how can we handle this, and we feel like with the amount of funding that we kept, we can take care of the most critical stuff. If the community is willing to take some compromise for the next year or so with some people market may not be that visible. But the council may or the committee may feel like this is really important and we cannot skip on this. That's also possible. But again, I think the council has a very difficult task in front of them to balance all the different needs out there in the community, with given the deficit that brought by COVID. Yeah, hopefully that answers your question in some way.
Yes, it does. Thank you. And then the only other point I wanted to make is about East Washington. I mean, I appreciate all of the things that you're considering, like, stuff that we can do right away that does not have a huge budgetary impact, that may be helping with some of the things. But I mean, in the context of Vision Zero, where the goal is to eliminate not only all fatalities, but all serious injuries by 2030, so less than 9 years from now. I mean, I think really having a plan, and I think PCBB is working on that, or the full city agencies are working on that action plan for 2030. I mean, I think, it seems pretty obvious to me that coming up with more creative messaging, I mean, that can be a small part of it, but yeah, I think it's absolutely unrealistic to eliminate all injuries and fatalities in East Washington elsewhere if we do not have a plan that takes into account these infrastructure changes, which come with, like, as you mentioned, like, you need to think about what happens when car traffic gets rerouted to other corridors, given that there are so few through the isthmus. But I mean, I think I would be very pessimistic that Vision Zero is a realistic goal if we don't think at that level of changes. And I think this ties also into what you have said, like, well, part of the goal is, like, we want to get people on BRT, we want to get people walking, biking. But of course, if people don't feel safe on East Washington, we put BRT stations there and they center running BRTs, and they will have to cross East Wash to get to the bus station. And crossing is when people have been killed this year and in previous years. I mean, I think this is all tied together. So it's unsafe, therefore people will keep driving, therefore it gets even less safe. So I think it's going to be a big challenge. So, yeah.
We do have East Washington Avenue as an agenda item for a future meeting, Harold. So we'll be talking more about it. Go ahead, Yang.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we'll definitely, talk about East Washington Avenue in more depth. But I just want to say that you're absolutely right, Harold. I think, in order, for us, and I think any U.S. cities to achieve, the real zero death in our system, I think, we need fundamental changes in our transportation infrastructure, and also I think in our society structure, how people travel. With that amount of traffic out there, creating so many different conflicts, and with people behaving differently, with current culture, I don't see any city in US will be able to achieve that goal. I think the only city who did that in the whole world was Oslo, Norway, in 2019. So they achieved that in motor vehicle involved death. But I think even for Sweden, they started the Vision Zero initiative. Even though I think even they are kind of struggling. So I think we acknowledge that. I think when we design initiative, we thought about that. But should we still do it? I think absolutely. Even if we cannot do it perfectly, I think we should still do it, and we should still save the lives that we can save. And also, can we call it Vision Zero? if we know that it's unlikely by 2030 we're going to really be able to achieve that goal. I also think so, because I think 0 is the only acceptable goal that we should set. It may take a while to get there, but I think we cannot. I don't think we want to call it, let's say, Vision 10, Vision 9, or Vision 8. I think the Vision 0 is the only thing we can call it. But I think Harold, you said what you said is very real. To have the fundamental changes, I think that's what I think. At least for me, I think that's what I want to see eventually. But in the meantime, there is a lot of challenges that we need to address, such as how can we come up with hundreds of millions of dollars, for example, for us to take over East Washington Avenue, have total control of it, and even that, if we totally change East Washington Avenue, where did the traffic go? They will not magically just disappear if we reduce capacity. I think some people will be forced to choose other alternatives. Some people may just still in their vehicle and they just go to a different route, and that creates huge impact on other streets. For example, when we worked on the Mifflin Street project, Boulevard project a few years ago, and Diverter project after that, all we heard is that the traffic should go to East Washington Avenue. Traffic shouldn't be on Mifflin Street or Dayton Street. So I think there's a lot of things we have to be very mindful, and it's challenging. And also, I think the culture of the society is going to be a big thing as well. We can reduce East Washington Avenue, the number of lanes on East Washington Avenue. We can maybe cut the traffic, the volume, from over 50,000 vehicles a day to, let's say, 20,000 vehicles a day. And we can maybe, just have a 1 or 2 in each direction. But if we still have people driving at 110 miles per hour on East Washington Avenue, we're still going to have issues. And, the 110 mile per hour speed is not, I didn't make that up. Actually, Officer Ferrari will tell you that's clocked on the radar. So I think it's a much bigger problem, and I think we're coming to work on it for as long as it takes to get there. But there are realities, there are challenges, and we need to do that mindfully.
Thank you, Harold. Does anybody have any other comments for Yang? Okay, thanks, Yang. Sabrina, you're next.
All right, good evening, everyone. So I'll start with some updates on revenues, both good and bad news there, and then just some operational and project updates from the last quarter. So in terms of revenues, the good news is we have seen some significant increases when compared, taking a look at June compared to January and February. Revenues have about doubled from that time period. So it is a big bump from 2020 and early this year, but overall we're still at about half of pre-COVID levels. So year to date, we're at 3.1 million compared to 7.8 million in total revenues over the same period in 2019. And revenues from our largest source of revenue, which is parking garages and transient parking, is still, even looking at the highest levels, it's still less than half of the pre-COVID levels with regard to demand and revenues. In terms of where we're at current revenue and demand levels, we're projecting about a $7 million total for revenue this year, and $7.4 million deficit. That would be funded with reserve funds. In terms of where those are at right now, our beginning balance was 17.7 million. At the beginning of this year, we're expecting those to be at 10.3 by the end of this year. And assuming that there is some nominal increase in demand, but not significant recovery, we're still looking at about 7 million in reserves that will need to be used again next year, leaving us with a balance of 3.4 million. So again, kind of based on where we're at right now, if nothing changes, we have adequate reserves to continue funding current operating levels and expenses till about mid-2023. So obviously looking to see what closely at recovery through the end of this year and early next year will be critical. And in terms of looking at potential reductions in costs, there is very limited areas where we can reduce costs. About, I think, 9.5 million of expenses are directly related to just maintaining and operating the garages. And those are things that really can't be reduced. So snow removal in facilities and rooftops, just general maintenance to make sure that they are safe for users, and staffing as well are included in that. And then the remainder of the budget, which is a little over 6 million, is various payments for pilot, the payment in lieu of taxes, and expenses for parking enforcement personnel, as well as allocations for services from the general fund. So any reductions that we would propose to those expenses are really just reductions in revenue to the general fund. So if we're looking at actual cost reductions to close that $7 million gap, we're looking really at that 9.5 million portion of the budget that is for our operations of facilities that are also revenue producing. And in terms of where we're seeing occupancy, it does vary quite a bit by facility. And interestingly, the Wilson garage and Brayton lot are currently the lowest occupancies. Those are traditionally are two of our highest occupancy facilities. We're at about 20% peak average occupancy at those, compared with State Street campus, which has really maintained around 45% peak occupancy throughout the pandemic. That's currently at 57% year-to-date average peak occupancy. So that's one that has not been as heavily impacted of our facilities compared to others. And then I think we're at about 35% with the State Street Capitol Garage in terms of average daytime weekday occupancy, and 47% at Capitol Square North Garage and Overture Center. So really quite a few changes in what we've seen previously in terms of which facilities were highest demand and which tended to be on the lower end of occupancy. On the bright side, we are starting to see some increase in events and actually have some pay-on entry special events returning. We've got several scheduled at the Livingston Garage this month. And also with the pandemic, we've been getting more frequent requests for non-standard uses of parking facilities. So things like small, non-amplified concerts, photo shoots, filming in our facilities. And we've been working on creating a standardized and more streamlined permitting process to allow that. And so folks are aware of that option to request other uses, and it also provides potentially some additional revenue stream for us in terms of the permit fee and the parking or other event related fees that would be generated from that. I know Yang updated you on some changes to the office and returning to in-person services. So I apologize if this is a duplicate, but I wasn't sure if you mentioned, we've also implemented a system for folks to schedule appointments online for in-person services called No Wait Inside. That's available for people to schedule on our website. They can also call to schedule various appointments. And we've also put in a couple of kiosks for the RP3 permit process. So these are intended for the walk-in customers that previously would be filling out a paper form handed over to our staff. And our staff would then be later keying in all that information into the database. So the kiosks and working with IT, those have been set up so folks don't have to necessarily create an online user account for the permitting. They can bypass that process and submit directly. So it is quite an improvement in terms of efficiency for our staff and also for the users that just aren't interested in having to set up an online user account, are still able to do that in person and submit that online. Also, in terms of some project updates, the meter replacement project that we've been working on for several years is now officially completed. We've completely retired the old multi-space meter system, all of the servers and credit card processing accounts associated with those. The new Pay by Cell app that we've been sort of did a soft rollout on that. We announced it via press release, but have not heavily advertised that. It's been working well. Haven't noticed any problems on the enforcement integration or with our reporting and revenue side of things. So we're going to be kind of moving to the next phase of promoting that, working on getting some labels printed that are going to be posted on all the meters that will have information on the pay by cell option and how to download the app. So it'll be much more visible, and I think we'll see probably a big increase in use with that when it's visible to anyone using those meters. In terms of enforcement, we're continuing to work on negotiations with a potential facility that would house parking enforcement operations. Also have had a couple of meetings with the RFP team for the new towing contract. The current contract is expiring next year. So we're working with purchasing and police, fleet, metro on that RFP process and any updates to the new contract. So hopefully we'll get that actually out yet this year and give us some extra time to make sure we don't have a lapse in that contract. And I guess last, the Lake Street Garage redevelopment project, those proposals were due towards the end of last month. And the city's received 7 proposals that are currently under the review process right now and evaluation by staff teams. So I don't know if everyone saw those, but if folks are interested in seeing those proposals, those are all posted online, and happy to share the link with everyone if you've not received that or seen those proposals. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Sabrina, it would be helpful. Why don't you send the link to Patrick and then he can distribute it and anybody who's interested can look, because we should be seeing that report, I believe, is supposed to go to Finance and the Transportation Commission.
Mm-hmm.
Comments or questions for Sabrina? Denise, go ahead.
Great, thanks, Ann. Sabrina, just curious on the cell app for parking and then on the kiosks for the residential parking permits, are those ADA accessible compliant?
That is a great question. In terms of for visual accessibility?
Yeah, visual, but also height. So wheelchair height accessible on the kiosks, and then screen reader accessible on the cell app. Because I can easily imagine, you know, my wife drives and she can tell me, you know, get us our parking permit, so, or get us our, you know, our meter permit. So yeah, just curious about the accessibility. And
Yeah,
also
and-
not wanting to make sure the city's not vulnerable to somebody being upset about them not being ADA compliant.
Yes, in terms of the height, yes. We do have ADA, both, you know, looking at the meters and then with our kiosks that are wheelchair accessible in terms of height. I'm not certain on the screen reader ability with the mobile app, so that I'd have to look into with our vendor, verify that. I don't really answer that question offhand.
Cool. If you need testers, you know, at all, just let us know because we can
Okay.
easily test.
Great, thank you.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, keep us posted on that, would you both?
Will do.
Okay, other comments?
Anne, my warning siren is going off in my neighborhood, so I may be
Okay.
having to leave.
Okay, yeah,
Till I
there've been
find out
some,
what's going on.
okay,
So-
go ahead. There have been tornadoes popping up all day and there was just one in Iowa County. So, you know, if we have a tornado warning in Madison and everybody's siren goes off, we'll either just adjourn the meeting or recess the meeting. We can decide should that happen. So
And I
hopefully we'll
see
be back.
as well. Yeah.
I see one from tornado warning for Madison on my phone. I don't hear sirens, but
I hear sirens.
I'm going
Okay.
downstairs.
Okay, so everybody should be safe. We have two choices. We can either recess the meeting or we can adjourn the meeting. We don't have anything on our agenda that is critical that needs to be addressed and back to the council. What are our choices? This is Ken, go ahead.
And I think we should probably just reschedule. My wife just told me to go into the basement and
Okay.
and that thing, and who knows how long that's going to last. And I apologize to the lieutenant who's been waiting around to give his report, but why don't you and I work on the next agenda setting thing and just try to fit it in?
We will. We don't have anything that absolutely needs it, and we apologize to Lieutenant Fiore and Sean Malloy and others who've been waiting to come forward. But so I take that as a motion to adjourn and refer the items that we still have open to the next meeting. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second. I'm going to assume unanimous consent vote unless anybody objects. And everybody stay safe and go to your basements. Take care.